Cool. Hey, Jefferson, how's it going?
Hi, good man. How are you?
Good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, Jefferson Moneo for
Yeah.
Cosmic Dawn. And I'm Daniel with the Film Craziest Show. Glad to be chatting with you.
Nice to meet you too.
Now, I'd love to start with just whenever I talk about a film that has cults in it, I always love to learn a bit more about the research. So, what was it like? What was the research like creating the Cosmic Dawn cult?
Well, when I first started writing this, I wanted to do something involving Satanism. So originally it was going to be Satanic. It was a completely different story. I mean, it didn't take place in the same play. The setting was different. The characters were different, all of that. But I wanted to do something about that. And that was a few years ago. And then as I was sort of starting to work on characters and on the story, I was writing at a place near my apartment. At the time I was living in Vancouver. I live in Toronto now.
Okay.
And there used to be a woman that used to come into this coffee shop on a regular basis, and she would always be sitting with different people and sort of invite herself to sit down with different people. And I just noticed her because she was sort of a character sort of in this coffee shop. Um, and after a while, I started noticing that she was meeting predominantly sort of like younger people, maybe in their early 20s. She was maybe in her early 40s, late 30s, something around there. And she would go and sit down with them. And I would notice by the time they were done talking, some of these younger kids would be crying, and she would be hugging them and consoling them. And then one day she came and asked to sit down with me. So she sat down with me. And she was from a group called Radiant Rose, which I don't know if they're based in Vancouver. And I don't know if you technically define them as a cult, but they have sort of occultist beliefs, sort of very new agey, occulty stuff. And so I realized that she was in there sort of recruiting people and asking people to come and, do you want to change your life and all of this stuff. So she was kind of meeting with these people that were lost. And so that led me to sort of learn a little bit more about Radiant Rose. And then that led me to Eckankar. And then that led me to sort of, look into the Moonies and all these different sort of groups. And of course, Nexium, that didn't exist at the time. But so I sort of looked into all of that, but I wanted to do something that was a little more genre based. And so that sort of transmuted into UFO cults, and I sort of had a sort of personal connection to that sort of material, and so that's sort of how that led me to that. But a lot of these groups' beliefs are all sort of interwoven in this group's, in the Cosmic Dawn cults beliefs as well.
Okay. Do you mind sharing what your personal connection to it is?
Well, when I was 12 years old, I grew up in Saskatchewan, and my grandmother and my grandfather had a ranch sort of near the American border in southern Saskatchewan. So it's sort of out of the grain belt. It's more sort of pasture land and cattle land.
Okay.
More sort of a little bit more, looks a little bit closer to like the Badlands, a little bit, not quite Badlands, but it's very sort of similar to that. A lot of rolling hills and buttes and stuff like that.
Sure.
And I would go out there and sort of stay at the ranch in the summers. And one night I was laying in bed in the upstairs bedroom at my grandmother's house, and there were all these lights kind of coming in through the window. And I thought maybe it was farm machinery, or I don't know, something outside. So I got out of bed. I remember looking at the clock, and it was 11:32. And then coming downstairs, and I found my grandmother out in the yard, sort of staring at the sky. And I looked up, and it kind of looked like the northern lights, but it was much, much brighter, like much brighter. And I looked out, and it was just like this sort of swirl of colors above us. And I didn't know what it was, and neither did my grandmother. And then in an instant, it just kind of went and disappeared. And we're sort of baffled by what we saw, and we came back inside not really knowing. She woke up my grandfather. My grandfather said must have been an airplane or something, or I don't know. He didn't believe there could be anything beyond that.
Okay.
But we weren't so sure. It was something that we could not explain, and to this day I can't explain it. I still talk about it with my grandmother. And then the strange thing though is that when I went back up to the bedroom, the clock was now 8 minutes behind. And I remember it being like 11:32 because it was late. I was young, I mean, that was late for me then. And the clock had went backwards, and it's just something that I could never explain. And it's something that, not unlike the character in the film, nobody ever really believed that story. I mean, people still don't believe it. People always sort of try to rationalize it and say, oh, it could have been this or that or whatever, but it was very strange. And so I kind of took that and sort of combined that into, what I was interested in writing about cults and really about belief, just sort of in general. So, and where, why people believe what they do, and are they predisposed to believing in certain things. And I'm certainly predisposed to believe in unexplained flying objects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, has your
So I had a
grandmother
very strange sort of unexplained encounter when I was young, and I still remember it vividly.
Okay, so were you able to like bring any your memories, like the all the lights seen in the film? Was that at all inspired by what you saw?
Yeah, the sort of, if in the film at the beginning, there's a very young girl sort of walking from this campsite through the trees, and there's all these sort of lights sort of pulsating in the trees, and that came from that. I never had, there was never any like beam, shaft of light, and a sort of, very kind of archetypical UFO experience. There's no, beam of light that came down and, lifted me into the sky. That certainly never happened. But the very strange lights in the sky, and it was maybe 10 seconds in my experience, but that sort of visual treatment was, from what I remember of that, certainly influenced that scene in the film.
Okay, interesting. Now, in the film, you put the blood moon on screen. So did you actually shoot that during the clips, or was that done in post-production?
That was done in post-production. We did actually shoot one blood moon, but it didn't look good enough, and we're going to have to do visual, like some like a visual treatment to it anyway. We're going to have to add effects to it. So we just shot a clean moon because, talking with the effects house, it was going to be easier to do that way.
Sure. Now there's another fantastical scene where Rowe kind of goes into Elise's sweater, and there's this like fantastical scene, which is a lot of visuals. How long did that take to do in post-production?
I mean, that's probably a better question for the VFX house. I'm not
Sure.
sure exactly how much time they allocated to that, but it was maybe a 6-week sort of visual VFX production window in
Okay.
post. So around 6 weeks to do all of the effects in the film.
Okay. Did that scene, did that meet your expectations, what you were visualizing?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I did. I wanted to do more. There was more sort of like intricate things that we wanted to do, but the nature of sort of low, but I wouldn't say we're low budget film, but we're certainly on the lower end of the sort of budget window. It's difficult to have enough time to do all the things that you really want to do sometimes. So for what we had in terms of time and being able to allocate to doing all that stuff, I mean, it's complicated because you need to shoot plates. You need to shoot things multiple times to make sure you have enough for VFX to work with in post. And so that took time, and that time was allocated to making sure that we got the shots that we really needed, as opposed to getting everything sort of like, on my shot list or on my wish list.
Okay, sure. Now, I feel like with the budget, it doesn't feel low budget, just in the way, because the where you guys shoot the Cosmic Dawn cult in their property, seems so huge. The sets are so great. Can you talk about getting that location?
Well, the set, so we had rented it was we shot in Sudbury, Ontario, and anybody that shot up there, I'm sure, knows David Anselmo. He's sort of like the king of the North up there. He owns he's got a sweetheart deal with the city of Sudbury. He took over an old hockey rink and turned it into a film studio. So we had rented that to do the set build, and my brother actually is a set carpenter. So my brother and the company that he works with built the sets for us.
He did a great job.
Thank you.
Now, did he bring in those rock structures, or what was the story behind those?
So that actually, you're talking about the screaming heads, like the big sort of stone heads.
Yeah.
So that is actually, we did not build that. That actually exists. That's in Berks Falls, Ontario. So about 2 hours north of Toronto. And we had been up sort of in North Bay, Sudbury, Northern Ontario location scouting, and our location scout had read the script, which if there's any location managers or location scouts out there, please read the script and try to interpret and find places like that rather than just apartment. Anyway, so he had read the script and was like, I got to show you this place. I just think like it's so wild and strange that I think it could fit for your film. And we went out there. And Peter Carmini is the guy's name. He's an artist who had bought this plot of land, I'm not sure how long ago, and he had built his own castle. Like it's not as big as a castle, but it's his own house. He calls it Midlothian Castle.
Okay.
And had built all of these structures, like these screaming head structures. And every September, not for the past couple of years because of the pandemic, but he has a music festival there called Harvest Festival. People from all around the world go. It's like an EDM sort of festival.
Okay.
They have all these structures out there. And anyway, it was a really wonderful place. We kind of hit it off with Peter and asked for permission to use his artwork in the film, and if we could use the property to shoot. And because he was an artist, he was more than willing to let us do that. And he had also been set up because he'd had these festivals there, right? So it was fairly well set up for a film crew to come in. There's ample space for parking and stuff like that. And just a really great guy, and a really committed member of that community up there. So, instead of asking us for a large location fee, he wanted us to make no donations to the public library and stuff like that.
Awesome.
So yeah, really, really nice guy and very talented artist. And I recommend anybody that visits Ontario or lives in Ontario to go up to Berks Falls and check out Screaming Heads and Midlothian Castle. It's a pretty special place.
It sounds
And then
really
we
cool.
and then we incorporated all that iconography into the film.
Okay, cool. Now
Yeah.
I'm gonna bounce off that EDM. You mentioned EDM festival, and there's this
Mhm.
scene in the film where everyone's singing along to Carpenter's Interplanetary.
I'm going to correct you there. I'm going to say Klaatu. I don't like the Carpenter's version. So that's actually, so Klaatu is a
Okay.
Canadian. Yeah, it's probably most well known. So you're correct in that the Carpenter's, that version is probably better known than Klaatu.
Sure.
But Klaatu is a Canadian sort of prog rock band from the early 70s.
Okay.
And the
Appreciate
funny
you
thing about
correcting me.
them is that they released their album. They didn't put any credits on their album when they released it. And back then, people suspected that it was the Beatles under a different name. And you can kind of hear the sort of Beatles-esque isms in that song and Calling Occupants. But it's just kind of wild to think that people assume that. But they're actually I don't know. I'm not sure if they're from Toronto, but they're definitely Canadian.
Okay, cool little music history. Thank you for correcting me. But what was it
Oh,
like just filming that scene in general? It must have been a fun day.
yeah, that was probably the funnest day we had on set. The actors had a really great time. And yeah, that kind of came a little bit later in the script development. And I think the fact that we had a steady cam operator, the fact that we had talent that was so game to do all this stuff really contributed to having a fun day. So we really just kind of played around for half the day doing that song, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out in the film.
Okay, yeah.
We call it
All
the
about
sing.
having fun.
We call it the sing along in the kitchen.
To call that's a good thing to call it, I think.
Mhm.
Cool. Now I think I only have time for a couple more. So I just have to ask, I think you come up with your own original language for the cult.
Mhm.
So what was
Reptine.
that? Reptine. What was that like creating that?
Well, I mean, I wrote the script, so I wrote those dialogue bits in English, and then I just went on a bunch of different language websites and tried to translate it into a unique language using words that kind of fit together, like spoken out loud, right? So
Okay.
it was more about like the rhythm and the tonality of the words was sort of how I chose them. So, I've had people see this film that had studied Latin and asked, "Is there Latin in there?" Because there's a few Latin words. Or I've had people that speak. I can't remember all the different languages that I had used, but I had numerous people ask me, "Do you speak this language, or do you know this language? Because I recognize this word or that word." And there's a reason I wanted to use all these sort of global languages and take bits and pieces from each to form something unique, because in the film there are members from the cult that are from all over the world. So part of the story is that all these people sort of have been found by this cult from different countries all over the place. So it seemed like an effective way to sort of create your own language and also stay in line with the story in the film.
Okay, very cool. And just my last one here. What's it like casting the present? Like, was it like casting a cult leader? Because I feel like the actress needs so much presence. So what was it like casting that character of Elise?
Well, we knew we wanted to cast somebody who was not a native English speaker, because we wanted to cast somebody that had come from somewhere else. So in a way, they were not, I mean, they're not from the place where the story takes place, because as I just said, like the cult comes from all over the world. So we wanted the leader to sort of have this sort of mysterious background that nobody really could quite place. Where were they from? How did they end up here? These are all questions that we wanted to raise in the story. And so that's how we really started looking. We wanted somebody, we wanted to have an international cast just in general.
Okay.
And we definitely knew that we wanted to have the cult leader. So we were working with producer Mauro Mueller, who is from Mexico. He's like a Swiss Mexican guy, and he was one of the producers on the film. And he had worked with a lot of actors in Latin America and had recommended some. And so we went through the process that way. So we were working with like a Latin American casting director, and that's how Antonia Zegers got cast, who's I think fantastic in the film. And she's from Chile, so she's really well known in Chile. This is her first English language film. And yeah, so that's kind of how that came about.
Okay. Hopefully get some Chile fans for Cosmic Dawn as well.
Yeah, I hope so, right?
Cool. Awesome. So I'd love to thank you, Jefferson Moneo, for your time today chatting with me on the Film Crazy Show about your film.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great meeting you.
Nice to meet you too.